Welcome and thank you for attending my presentation about Reinhardt or Reinhacks. Reinhardt is undoubtedly the strongest human in the world of ReZero. But being the strongest does not mean that he can fix everything, and that is because the story ensures that not everything can be solved simply with brute force. In fact, his inhuman strength has done little or nothing for the things he truly cares about, but we will get to that later. Reinhardt was born as a result of the love between Loana Astrea and Heinkel Astrea. The first 2 years of his life were the only stage of his childhood where he was truly happy, although he probably does not remember it. Everything would change when his mother developed a rare illness that left her in a coma. This illness caused her to fall asleep one day and never wake up again. In simple terms, time froze for her. Currently, Reinhardt is already 20 years old and his mother is still asleep. Her appearance has also not changed. As a result of this misfortune, his father Heinkel began to fall apart, but he was still a loving father to his son, at least until Reinhardt was 4 years old. Although he did not entirely neglect him, the truth is that he was already sinking into alcoholism. Since his father was in a bad mood during those days, Reinhardt decided to prepare a meal for him. However, he could not distinguish salt from sugar, so the world gave him a power that allowed him to do so. In this way, Reinhardt received the power to discern salt from sugar. But when he was 5 years old, something happened that would change everything. It is said that on that day, Reinhardt and his father had a sparring match with wooden swords, and despite it being Reinhardt's first time using a sword, it turned out that he had so much talent that he was able to defeat his father, an expert swordsman. This did not sit well emotionally with his father, and everything got worse when shortly after, Reinhardt received the divine protection of the Sword Saint. It is believed that this was the final blow his father needed to completely detach and distance himself from his son. The worst part is that not only did his father distance himself from his life, but his grandfather Wilhelm also ended up leaving the family due to an important event that occurred during those days. What happened was the passing of Teresia Bangastrea, the current bearer of the divine protection of the Sword Saint and the grandmother of Reinhardt. She was leading a squad of knights against the White Whale, one of the most powerful creatures in the world, and she could do this thanks to her divine protection. But all of a sudden, and in a very mysterious way, this power would abandon her and pass to Reinhardt. It is not known why this happened, but it caused her to lose her life. One way or another, both Wilhelm and Heinkel began to accuse Reinhardt of being the murderer of Teresia, and all this when he was only 5 years old. Little by little, the country of Lugunica and the world became aware of Reinhardt's power. While his own country threatened Reinhardt not to even think about using his power against them, other countries also began to take measures. It is known that Wallachia had assassination and kidnapping targets on the Astrea family in case they clashed with Reinhardt, and other nations requested the creation of the Reinhardt Law, which indicates that he is prohibited from approaching national borders. And if this agreement is broken, it will be regarded as a declaration of war. But as I said, not only the bordering countries imposed restrictions on him, but his own country, Lugunica, threatened Reinhardt with retaliation against his family if he did not use his power for the good of the kingdom. It is also known that he is prohibited from having any children with a foreigner. This is because if that were to happen, there is a risk that the divine protection of the Sword Saint would be passed to his descendants. And in this way, the power would stop being at the service of the nation. As he grew older, things would not be easy for Reinhardt, mainly because he is forced to live a life that is not necessarily his. He is forced to be the Sword Saint, and with that, he must adopt the duties that this power entails. As I said at the beginning, it is strange to see how despite his super strength, he is not able to fix the things that really matter, his family problems and the incident of the royal disease, an event where kings and their children began to die mysteriously. When he was 14 years old, he was assigned to an infiltration mission where it was necessary for him to disguise himself. It was there that he would meet Julius and eventually become friends with him. In fact, Julius is one of the few people who appreciates Reinhardt and considers him a friend. He would later meet Felix, although I must be honest, despite having read the entire main and side novel of ReZero, there is no explanation of how they became friends. However, Reinhardt is someone who is genuinely a good person, so I imagine he always knew how to treat Felix with respect, and that was enough for them to become friends. In case you do not know, Felix is not a complete human, and this brings him certain prejudices due to his race. It is not surprising that he gets along with the red-haired one. One day during his time off, Reinhardt decided to patrol the slums regardless, and it was there that he met a peculiar boy named Subaru. On that same night, he also discovered the true identity of Felt. Since Reinhardt still feels guilty about the demise of the royal family, it is no surprise that he took a certain personal interest in her, as she appears to be a survivor of this family. Coincidentally, that day Reinhardt ended up meeting the only two people who treat him in a way no one else does anymore, as a human being with flaws. Afterward, the events of the anime unfolded. But that is something we are already familiar with. As for what happened after the anime, maybe I will make a video about it later, since it contains a lot of spoilers. But now let us talk about his powers. The power scale is not something that catches my attention in ReZero, but since it is part of this section, I have to cover it. As I mentioned earlier, Reinhardt is the strongest being in this fantasy world. It is funny because the entity that grants him his powers, called Odd Laguna, is a powerful being, but even if this unknown entity decided to face the redhead, it would lose. The most interesting thing is that someone once asked the author how strong Reinhardt would be if he lost his divine protections. The author simply said that he would still be almost equally strong. Personally, I think Reinhardt has an immense amount of talent, and it would be unfair to say he is someone who does not put in effort because so far, he has simply not encountered a situation that pushes him beyond his limits. And that is because, well, he is already the strongest in the world. Among his most legendary feats is the detail that one day he delivered a letter in the middle of a rainstorm without a single drop of water touching it. Some believe he was just so incredibly fast that he dodged every drop, but I think he simply walked above the clouds to complete the task. In case you did not know, he has a divine protection that allows him to walk on clouds. It is also known from the latest spoilers that he is not faster than the speed of light. It seems that his speed is slightly below that level, but it is also confirmed that he was capable of traveling to the moon and back in mere seconds. Talking about all the divine protections he possesses would be an endless task, but I can assure you that he has a protection for any shonen situation you can think of. A protection that allows him to dodge the enemy's first attack. He has it, but not only that, he also has a protection that lets him dodge the second attack, the third attack, and every attack that comes after. A protection that makes him stronger during the time the sun is out. He has it. But he also has a protection that strengthens him during the night, during sunset, or even at dawn. No matter what atmospheric phenomenon is present, I guarantee he will have some protection to help him with it. And if by pure chance you manage to harm him, then his divine protection that makes him stronger the more injured he is will activate. You will realize how pointless this discussion is when I tell you that if by some miracle he were to die, then his Phoenix divine protection would activate, bringing him back to life as many times as necessary. Finally, in the most unfair part of the situation, it is said that the entity that grants him his powers is constantly evolving as the isekai world of ReZero discovers new concepts of science and physics. So if by sheer coincidence you were to bring nuclear bombs or phenomena exclusive to our reality to the world of ReZero, it would be in vain because Odd Laguna would immediately grant Reinhardt protections to adapt to those as well. I think there is no discussion that he is the strongest being in all of ReZero. But remember that strength is not everything, and we will see that quickly now. In the story of Golden Lion, Reinhardt reveals that he does not want to be the Sword Saint because that is something that was imposed on him. But if it were up to him, he actually does not want to be it. This has much to do with this point because Reinhardt has achieved things in his work, but he has not accomplished things that truly fulfill him and make him feel alive. It is not surprising that Reinhardt feels depressed and somewhat alone because he is constantly being treated as a perfect being, but he knows that he is not, and that is why he values the friendship he has with Felt and Subaru very much, because they are the ones most aware of this and treat him in a way he is not used to, a human with some strength but also with shortcomings. I would like to delve into the conclusion that Reinhardt will reach in this third season, but that would be spoiling, so if you do not want to be spoiled, I would recommend closing the video right now. I really like the conclusion he reached in this part of the story. Reinhardt was not willing to acknowledge that he was the murderer of his grandmother, but in the third season for the first time, he comes to terms with the fact that it was indeed his fault. But he does this in order to save his father and grandfather from imminent death. I see it as he accepted to carry the sins of his family for ironically the good of his own family. There is no indication that things in the Astrea family will improve, but there is a dialogue from one of the futures Emilia saw that gives some hope regarding this situation. The dialogue says the following: "My father is awesome, my father is splendid, my father is the man that my mother loved." We do not know what is happening at that moment for Reinhardt to say something so good about his father, and at this moment in the novel, things are much more tense than ever. But after a great problem, reconciliation also comes. Will Arc 9 be the arc that solves the problems of the Astrea? Personally, I do not think so. I would say that it will barely resolve some of the issues between Reinhardt and his father. I think it is most likely that all the problems will be resolved with the Crush arc. That is, while the Felt arc will be used to smooth over the rough edges between father and son, the Crush arc would be used to clean the rough edges with the grandfather, but that is just my deduction. But that has been all for today. I thank you for watching this video. I will be uploading more content like this, so I would appreciate it if you could stay tuned to my channel. I also apologize if the translation is not the best, but I tried to correct it with help after running it through the AI. But tell me, what do you think about Reinhardt's life?